is Pam McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. Joining me tonight is Ben Kinsley, our co-host and co-producer. Ben, how are you? I've been away for an entire month, so it's like you'll have to catch me up. And continuing with our candidate series, we're joined by Trevor Barlow, who's an independent candidate for governor. Trevor, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Pat.
Very nice.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you so much for being here.
Appreciate it.
So maybe you could introduce yourselves to our viewers.
Sure.
We like to do that.
Okay, my name is Trevor Barlow, and I am running as an independent candidate for governor of the state of Vermont. I say independent, even though there's really no formal party affiliation. I just didn't want to affiliate with the Democrats or Republicans for this cycle.
There you go.
Gotcha.
There's a why.
And what did you do before deciding to run for governor, and what kind of inspired you to do that?
So for a little over a decade now, I've been an executive of a software company that I founded.
Okay.
And I've been in technology for about 2 decades now. So the goal in moving back to Vermont, because I grew up in Springfield, Vermont originally, was to come back with my family and give them a taste of what I so cherished of my own childhood. So we, from growing up working on farms and such, I'm a sucker for barns, especially old barns. And I came up one weekend and found a gorgeous one for sale, and I told my wife we're in trouble at that point. So anyway, we bought this farm that we're renovating down in Proctorsville, Vermont. And as I got more involved locally, because we have 2 young children there in the school systems, and kind of bore witness to Act 46 coming into play, and just in general, I have entrepreneurship in my blood, as well as, I guess, political enjoyment. I like getting involved in the local issues. I started to see some things that were not reminiscent whatsoever of my own childhood growing up here.
Right.
And I started to see a loss of local control, which was very concerning to me. I saw some, I obviously witnessed the opioid epidemic in southern Vermont, went back to my proverbial hometown of Springfield, and saw empty buildings there. Yep. I saw seeds of change, but in general, I saw a shell of my former hometown. And after getting deeper in and doing some research, and like I said, being kind of the entrepreneur type mentality of the only way you can fix things is to come up with a plan and get involved, I was encouraged by some people that said, hey, you know what, you've come to our meetings and stuff, do you ever think of running for office? And I said, well, you know what, maybe I'll try it.
That's good.
We did.
Yeah, we were talking before the show about how difficult it is for some of the candidates to get included in the debates, because most of the time it's just the governor and the Democratic candidate. So we have to fix that. I think that's, if you're on the ballot, you get to be in the debate.
Exactly, especially if it's any type of organization that receives public funding.
Exactly.
It's just a no-brainer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because you never know. All these people, in the conversation we've had, good ideas, so bring them out there. So let's talk about them.
Exactly.
I just want to ask, I looked at your website, and your tagline is, let's work together to honor our history and innovate for the future. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think you sort of referenced it about growing up here and what's missing. But
I'd be happy to. Well, I think obviously the childhood memory versus the adult reality are 2 different things,
right,
as we know, unfortunately. But in general, everyone I've had the opportunity to speak with about just the state of Vermont, and I mean state as in physically as well as just how it's doing, they've all talked to me about this feeling like there's a loss of control locally. And I feel like in our past, the reason why, our whole history has been independent and kind of fiery, and we've always been more of a collaborative, agricultural-based culture with regards to do your own thing, take care of yourself, take personal responsibility, but at the same time help your neighbor if they're in need. And I just started noticing, where these towns were, they're trying to get some pride back that,
Right.
where they had strong manufacturing industries, they would take care of their own. And I feel like there's, from what I've seen and researched into, there's been this gradual erosion of local control and consolidation of kind of decision making at the state, as well as, the obvious tax burdens that are out there right now. And for me, it was trying to run a campaign that says, you know what, we need to play to our strengths, which has always been this culture of independence and local control, while at the same time opening ourselves up to new opportunities with regards to innovation and technology, frankly getting into agriculture with regards to the cannabis market, getting into the tax and regulation, and really not shutting out any opportunity for people to make a living and be able to support themselves. To just go a little further, I think that most Vermonters, especially, and most human beings, if you give them the opportunity to take care of themselves, 99.9% of the time, they're going to do the right thing. And the more you empower them, chances are the better kind of outcomes you're going to get.
They'll feel better about themselves.
Exactly.
Right.
So.
Interesting. Good answer.
Cool. Also on your website, you highlight several areas that you'd like to focus on. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a couple comments on each of them and kind of what direction you're going and your thoughts.
Sure.
We talked a little bit about Act 46.
Yes.
And so what are your thoughts on Act 46 in general? That seems to be one of the galvanizing things that got you into this.
Yeah, definitely. I think to me, Act 46 is a tragedy. And it's not, I'm not trying to over dramatize. I'm seeing the impacts right now in the town that I chose to come back and, start my Vermont life again in, as well as seeing some of the more rural communities where we're taking away probably the single most valuable public resource they have, which is their schools and their school buildings. And if you don't have, the population of your neighboring town that you've now been forced into a supervisory union with, you've essentially given up your control over the money that's spent on your children's education, the way the infrastructure is managed, and any and all decisions, because you are now a minority party to a larger supervisory union board that's managing your district. And to me, once again, that plays into what for me is the antithesis of Vermont. Of allowing people. It's not an easy state to live in. We all know that. We live here for lifestyle and for beauty. Not too many people move to Vermont saying, I'm going to go to Vermont and be a billionaire. Like, okay, yeah, New York City, you'll do that, somewhere else. But you come to Vermont because it's a quality of life and it's a culture of caring. And the minute you take control away from people at a local level, especially in a state, come on, we're just barely 600,000 people. Like, we're not even a major metropolitan area as a state.
Right.
So we have to trust in our local communities, just because of the sheer scale of our geography and distance, to be able to take care of themselves. So, and just general philosophy that you get the best decisions closest to the problems.
And it's interesting that you say that, because there was a poll from VPR back in August and they asked a question about Act 46, and the question was phrased something along the lines of, do you think that education spending is best addressed at the local level or the statewide level? And over 70% of respondents said that the local level is the correct way to handle education spending and the growth in education spending.
Yeah.
Because local people make the best decisions.
Yep.
But it still harkens back to how it's all paid and a conglomerate up by the state level, because you really don't have local control. When you look at the budget, and I'm thinking of my town, Berlin, there's very few things you can actually impact. The salaries are already negotiated. Yep. Taxes are set on a state level, so we'd have to change the system to make local control mean something.
Taxes are still a local impact. So your spending determines your tax rate.
Yes, but when it goes up to the state and it gets combined, you get surprised when your tax
there's
rate comes out.
There's some formulas that'll impact that, but by and large, your biggest driver of your tax rate is still your local spending. And there are pieces of it that you're going to be accountable, and there are some districts that are insulated because of the formula.
Right, that's true.
So, there's a number of things to look at, but I think
you
you're
at least
right.
can control your budget.
You can at least
as
control your
far,
budget.
as far as the local. And to your point, I mean, when you look at it, still, as I get deeper and deeper into things, it's staggering to think that we have an almost $6 billion budget for the state of Vermont, and almost half of that is spent on education.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And
Wow.
it's interesting because people have said this to me before. Is like, well, if you look at the amount that New Hampshire spends, they spend about $100 million more than the state of Vermont does. At least a couple of years ago, they did.
Right.
Yep.
So roughly similar in terms of level of spending, but they have twice as many people. So
I was going to
people
say
are
they have
like-
twice the
Right, right,
population.
exactly.
Yeah.
and so I hear people say this all the time, and I'm like, yes, but when we look at the Vermont state budget, we're including education spending in that number. So we're looking at total budget. Most state, in fact, we're the only state that includes education spending as a line item, as an entire separate line item in our budget. There's usually state funding for local school districts, but they don't absorb the local budgets into their state budget like we do.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, I think another thing that needs to be said with regards to not just local control, but how we're treating our education system right now,
Right.
is the fact that we know right now we have a population that is in flux, right? We know we're struggling to fill a lot of jobs that are available,
Right.
especially in the trades, and we're struggling to maintain our youth in state or attract people here. And when I get into the fundamentals of community development, of what are the things you need in order to attract people to your community? And if you ask most parents, the number one thing on their list is going to be schools.
Right.
How are the schools?
Right.
Well, you have these now huge swaths and geographically of rural land that now who's going to move there without a school?
That's right.
What are you going to do when you're making your decision? Even if you're a parent, you're going to choose your commute for yourself for work over your commute for your child. And I know we have that decision where we already realize with our children that they could be on a bus for over an hour
Right.
one way to
Right.
get to that to me is, it just gets to the point of you need to start looking holistically at the problem to truly assess what the impacts are of the decision. So
Exactly.
Interesting.
So moving on, there's plenty
Yeah.
to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But healthcare.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on healthcare?
Well, my thoughts is our healthcare system is obviously broken with regards to the way insurance works, the costs. I mean, if we want to go globally, we can look at the fact that we spend more than anyone, and yet we're ranked in the 30s of countries. But then you look at us as once again as a state of saying we have 600,000 people. How can we do this more effectively? And one of my ideas was getting into the economics of healthcare, and we know that if you invest in preventative healthcare, you tend to reap
Right.
your biggest rewards. And I've been noticing that we have all sorts of demographic changes going on in the state, but generally we've always been thought of as one of the healthier states, in theory. Happiness index or whatever you want to look at.
Right.
But our costs are no lower than any of the other states.
Right.
And so an idea I had was that we already have, and this plays into kind of the Act 46 and getting creative about how we not only boost our economy but save our rural areas, is every school at this point, for the most part, has some sort of healthcare facility, whether it be a nurse's office
Right.
or some sort of treatment office. We could take that and expand it and actually have preventive care clinics in every school.
That would be cool.
Good idea.
Which would say, here's the deal, if you're up until age 18 to start, because ultimately I think we should do it for adults too, because I think it's one of the best investments we could make as a society. But you're going to have your physical, you're going to have your dental, you're going to have your vision, and you're also going to have your mental. So, which I think would take care of the issues with regards to some of the things with student health and bullying and all these types of things, where if you give kids an area where they can go that's a safe place where they know they're being taken
Right.
care of and they're being taught to take care of themselves, I think if you're looking at a generation ahead, will reap significant benefits that'll help to make a
Great
dent in
idea.
the
I worked for a
insurability.
major corporation in New York, and they had a health facility, and it operated more like the express care
Yeah.
things we have now. I go there all the time for just stuff that you go up to the emergency room for, and that worked out great for all of us.
And I
That's
think
right.
from an adult perspective as well, just with our general population, I think we would look to allow them into these clinics as well and
Right.
say, here's the deal, it's sliding scale, it's low to no cost, but if you have a common cold
Right.
or if you have this or that, you shouldn't, I talked with someone today, in fact, that was telling me, that they have to pay $300 to $350 a month, single person, for insurance, and they said, that's a lot of money to me. That's a car payment. I can't afford to make that, and I'm fairly healthy, but you're kind of in this catch-22.
Right.
And I said, well, what if you had a clinic where you knew you could go in and pay $10 to $15 just to get the checkup and get your prescription written for your sinus infection or whatever? Oh, that would
Yeah,
be
sign
that
me
would
up.
that would be amazing. Sign me
Right.
up, and guess what? I would probably give more money as part of that because it's that service orientation. So, in general, with regards to, I guess, like I said, healthcare, I think we can do better, and I think preventive care is one of the
Right.
routes we should
Agree
take.
with you.
And then from there, you can look at the more complex procedures in an insured type model.
So you also talk about internet and innovation.
Yes.
Not super surprising given your background.
Yeah.
But what innovative things are you looking at in terms of moving the state forward?
Well, my general experience, and I'll say that coming from my younger years of having gone to a fairly liberal college out in Colorado and having thought, let's save everyone. I think I've, after having been in business, ratcheted back a little bit in the way and said, well, yes, let's save everyone, but how do we do it? And I think you have to unleash the power of innovation, because when you see what's going on in the world today because of technology and data and you name it, amazing breakthroughs are happening.
Right.
And so I think what that is proving is, once again, if you push the solution making out closer to the problems and you incent people to tackle these problems, you're going to come up with amazing solutions that can then be socialized and shared that might not necessarily come from kind of the enclosed environment of a legislature or a state government. Because as we know too, I think in general, government does not move nearly at the speed of business or localities as far as, as you go up the ladder. And so I think innovation can be a key tool to addressing a lot of our issues by investing in our communities. And one of the ideas I've been putting out there is taking a venture capital type approach to our issues with our localities and say, let's create an investment fund. So we're going to, at a minimum, if you take, there's the regional development corporations, there's 12 of them around
Right.
the state, which for the most part are amazing organizations. But they have a pretty narrow focus for the most part. If we told each of them, here's the deal, every year for 5 years, we're going to give you $1 million that's supposed to be invested in innovative ideas. As part of this, you need to create an innovation center somewhere, a centralized location where people can go to work on these ideas, to collaborate, and to solve problems. And part of that is you need to find matching funds with it. You need to get your local community involved. And I don't care if it's like a small scale investment, since now anyone can invest at almost any scale because of recent changes in finance law, is get your communities to invest. Even if it's $5 to $10, get people to get skin in the game, to get vested in their community and the solutions being created, and you'll bring people in that will create businesses. And it'll create wealth. And this isn't trickle down economics. This is, no, let's take money you're already giving to us, give it back to you locally, and empower you with some guidelines, but empower you and say, come up with a board of your local people And I know Pat and I were talking about this a little bit off camera before, which is if you go around the state of Vermont, every region is unique. They have unique identities.
And surprisingly so, but really unique.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
And so, leverage those identities.
Right.
We can't be up here in Montpelier, and I love Montpelier, it's beautiful, and telling people in Bennington what they should be doing when they're on the Massachusetts border.
Right.
Right.
That's a completely different environment of which you never know, maybe there'll be cross-state collaborations that they figure out to attract people into Vermont from Massachusetts, or people in Springfield who are on the New Hampshire border and dealing with those challenges of competition with regards to not just economics, but their own local issues that are unique. So I think if you do that and you set it up in such a way that any profits that are made from these ventures get poured right back into the program, that at a minimum, guess what, even if you have failure, you really don't have failure because you just took money that's existing in our tax base already and you're giving it back to the people who paid it, and allowing them to feel like, here, we've got somewhere we can go to have financing to solve our problems.
That's like Dave Bradbury in Burlington has
with VSET.
Oh my
He's
word.
doing great stuff.
We did a show there in his offices because it's so funky. I mean, people just come in and they can set up, and he's had some great successes, and he's sponsored by some of the bigger companies up there.
Well, and I know specific to your example, Pat, is dealer.com.
Oh, I love that company.
And talking about what my bigger goal is to create what you call the Virtuous Cycle, which is when you have people have success, they're going to return to where they came from to share it. It's just human nature.
Well, and I think it's cool about companies like Dealer.com and My Web Grocer is they're the second wave of technology companies, kind of behind IBM.
Yep.
And they've spawned their own thing now, and now those companies have kind of hit their market cap. And there's a whole nother wave of companies coming up behind them. And I think that is the cool thing to see, where that third wave of companies, tech companies, is coming into play because of all this intellectual capital that IBM brought in, and then Dealer.com and My Web Grocer and Logic Supply and those folks, and it's just continuing on.
And I know in the different startup communities I've been involved in, we talk about creating ecosystems, and it's always great, you have those companies, but guess what comes out of those companies? Restaurants, coffee shops, other types of retail that fills those downtowns. I know another organization that I definitely want to make sure that I mention is Brick Vermont, which Matt Dunn's been involved with, and Bob Flint down in Springfield with the Regional Development Corp down there.
What is that? Is
So,
Matt not with Google anymore, or is he?
He now is with a group called CORI, which is the Center on Rural Innovation.
Oh, really? We have to have him on the show.
And so, definitely have him up because he's doing some great things. And what they're doing in Springfield is they've started this. They got their initial chunk of funding in, their first $1 million, to renovate a school and turn it into an innovation center. Oh, awesome. And so there's the old Park Street School where I started my education in Springfield. Gorgeous old school, amazing history. Used to be a high school, then it became 4th and 5th grade, and then it's morphed, and now it's mainly empty. In fact, up until a few years ago, the town was looking at tearing it down because the cost of maintenance. They just couldn't upkeep it, and there wasn't anything there. And now this idea has come in to completely renovate the building and turn it into work-live with an innovation center that's based on one of Springfield's strengths, which I still think they're getting there, but need to do a much better job of marketing, which is they have the fastest internet in the world right now. I mean, on par with anyone because of VTEL being located there and having run all that fiber. And for me, having been around the country to all these technology centers and deal with startups and innovation, I'm like, this is ripe. Like, this is some of the best soil for growing anything in. You've got empty infrastructure. If we could loosen up on our regulations and oversight on some of that stuff and just say, if someone wants to come start a business here, and they're willing to invest, we'll do whatever we need to help them get going.
It's that loosening up on regulation thing.
So that leads actually very well into my next question, I think, which is affordability. You talk a little bit about affordability. It's a huge talking point for Governor Scott.
Yep.
How do you view affordability, and how is it similar and how is it different from the governor?
So I think similarly, obviously based on most of my commentary to this moment, it's about lowering taxes, figuring out a way to lowering taxes or taking revenue that's currently being held within the state budget and freeing that capital up for the localities in a way that makes it easier to access. The second part of affordability, I think, is revenue-based, which says, guess what? In order to make affordable things, you need more money. And right now, we're denying ourselves, and it's been denied the past couple of years, different market opportunities within our state that we could have amazing expertise in and generate revenue off. I don't care if it's just $5 million. That's $5 million more than we have, and $5 million goes a long way if invested properly. We need to do more on the revenue side and open up Vermont and say, Vermont is open for business, which if you ask anywhere else, probably around the country or especially just around New England, if you're going to pick a state to locate your business, where are you going to go? If it just was an organic question.
Right.
First is probably going to be New Hampshire, because if you're just strictly looking at tax and ease of doing business. Second, you're probably in a toss-up between Massachusetts and Connecticut, depending on what market you're going after. And then, I would beg to think we're probably going to fall towards the bottom unless you're looking for lifestyle.
Right.
But we should be going out there and saying, you can have both here. You can have an amazing quality of life, and we're going to do everything possible to make it easier for you to do business
The
here.
businesses that we've interviewed here on this show have always said all they want is predictability. They get settled here, and then we start fooling around with this tax and that tax, and they're like, just stop, just tell us, tell us what we can expect.
Don't change the rules on us.
Yeah, exactly, which they do all the time.
Well, and that's, business in general, right? Most businesses, it's about lowering your liabilities. It's like, how can I de-risk what I'm involved in? And
Where do you see certain marketing opportunities? Ag, or that's the one that comes to my mind.
Yeah, no, I think across the board. So I had the opportunity to go out and, other than farmers I know personally, go out and meet with some more farmers around the state and ask them, because they're doing amazing things. And farmers are some of the hardest working people on the planet who barely have any free time.
Right.
So they're so focused on their product, which is whatever their crop is or their animal. And, and now we're getting into that point of specialization. And we know in Vermont that all of our farmers and all of our manufacturers tend to do quality.
Right.
We're all about quality.
Right.
So we should be, as a state, helping them with marketing. All of them have said, I know all of the stuff about making a good product, but I don't know how to get it to market more readily, or to market it to differentiate myself.
Yeah.
And we all know we have this amazing brand as a state that needs to be leveraged to its utmost for them. I think about just a small example of, so I've had the opportunity to live around the country and overseas a bit, and the one thing that always kept me connected to the state, and probably one of the main reasons I'm even back here, is the fact Vermont Life.
And now they're not doing that anymore.
My mother would get me a subscription.
Yeah.
That was my Christmas gift every year. And no matter where I was, I always had those lovely pictures of this is the soul of Vermont. And I look at that as such a lost opportunity right now.
It's amazing.
Where here you go, here's your best branding and marketing tool. Distribute it in Boston, New York, out in the tech centers, and put that lifestyle message alongside a message of quality, and saying, guess what? We're aggressively seeking new business. Come do business with us. And that would be as we, budget-wise, I think it was like a couple $1 million a year from an investment point of view. Like I said, when we're dealing in billions of dollars of budgets, it's like something like that, and give control to the agricultural councils, give it to the tech council, be like, we have sections, come up with your content.
Huh?
VORAC.
Oh.
Give it to VORAC.
That's right.
Exactly.
But so what do you think about, so there's a brief discussion about this, but what do you think about moving a publication like that into an online platform? Do you think that's effective?
Oh, without a doubt. I think you have to do both. But and online is something that needs to happen. This is where I know I personally go back and forth a little bit because I'm such a fan of business and innovation, and then trying to figure out where can government do good. And I think that's one of the examples where it's great if you have the state kind of bringing its weight behind it and saying, this is our brand, we're marketing those items I was talking about, where it's the quality, it's the innovation, getting back into the stories of you go around, the history plaques that are out there all around the state, because I've been traveling to all these towns to try to see parts of the state I've never been to, just so I feel like I can relate on a human level when I'm in conversation. And you see these signs, and I know I was over near Wallingford the other day, and there was this sign about how there used to be this hotel that was built by these brothers who had a manufacturing company, and they exported around the world. And that same story, used to be in Springfield with gear shaping and Windsor and other places and up in the Northeast Kingdom. You have all these stories of a Vermont that once was, and I'm not saying we would replicate that day and time but we can do the modern version. And that really gets into do digital, but respect the past while moving toward the future.
I've for years said, Vermont has a very strong brand, right? We have the agricultural brand, we have the outdoor brand, we have, the bucolic, we're fall in Vermont right now.
Yeah,
right?
it's amazing.
But you think about like kind of that outdoors, we're more than that. We've got places like Global Foundries and Dealer.com, and we've got Revision Military, and we've got GE Aerospace, and we've got some advanced manufacturing technology companies that are here, but we're not known for that, right? And from a lot of the folks I've talked to in state marketing, they're reluctant to push that narrative of Vermont because they don't want to damage the existing brand. And I think you can do both.
I think you can.
And I think a great example of that is Switzerland, right? Switzerland has that outdoor mountain, they have that as part of their brand, but they also have banking, they have advanced manufacturing, all of these things that kind of fit under one brand that they've been able to do, and Vermont hasn't quite made that turn yet.
I think on your website you focus on outdoor recreation, which I haven't seen any candidate do, and I saw that and I went, good for him. That's who we are.
It's one of our largest pieces
industry.
of our economy.
For sure.
To touch on both comments, so I don't lose my train of thought, is investing in outdoor recreation and trails and whatever. There's been reports coming out that for every dollar invested, it's 6 to 7 times return.
Yeah, huge return.
No brainer, right? But to your point about Switzerland, and I would say we can even look within our own country's borders of Colorado, where I've had a ton of experience out there. It's, some of the best outdoor athletes I know out there are engineers. These are highly educated people who have amazing jobs, and what do? They spend a lot of money on equipment because that's their passion.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we'd be, once again, doing ourselves a disservice by not owning the fact that we can be multiple things at once.
Right.
And to what I just mentioned, I mean, Springfield, I know this is a loose interpretation, but as children growing up there, it was sort of a badge of pride. I don't know, I haven't asked many of the adults, but the fact that, if there was a war, that we were potentially one of the places that would be attacked because of the gear manufacturing, and because we're globally known for being the supplier of such high precision. That's to your Swiss example. What do you hear about when the Swiss are talking about watches? Precision.
Right.
Precision. We have a part of Vermont that's called the Precision Valley.
Right.
Like, why would you not leverage that brand and say, hey, you know what? Once again, we have huge empty factory buildings that are beautiful. You go to any urban area, you know what? Those are the first buildings innovators are going to, because it's large, empty square footage, if you're talking like a VSET type thing, where you can do almost anything you want, because it's a blank canvas, and it's lower cost than what you'd pay for, a quality office space. People just want a place where they can experiment with their craft and precision and build things of benefit. And so, yeah, let's do that with the Vermont brand. Let's say we have quality and we have technology.
And that's speaking of Switzerland. I used to actually work for a company. I'd fly over there all the time. It's a tough job.
Yeah.
But everything in Switzerland is made perfectly. It's quality. And no matter what you're talking about, and we could do that here in Vermont because that brand says quality.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what. It's just who we are.
And take that same, you look at, I think it's a law that you have to have quality on a maple
that's
syrup.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right. But that's, beyond that. I mean, you talk cheese, you talk craft beer, you talk maple syrup, you talk, hardwoods,
It's all here.
like cutting boards and stuff. Everything about Vermont is branded as quality, right?
And not
You
only
just
that,
transfer that to technology and manufacturing.
well, and all those things that we do, so you think about over the past couple of years, Hill Farmstead, right? #1 beer in the world, unequivocally. Anyone will tell you. And this is coming from, I lived in Belgium for a while when I was younger, and the monks have been making beer for a long time.
They got that
They've got
down.
their craft
Yeah.
in. And the first time I went to Hill Farmstead, it was the first place I had ever been in the United States where I felt like it was better than what I had had in Belgium.
Yeah.
And for me, that was amazing. And that was the first time I realized, we're doing it. And then, obviously you get into the heady topper stories with,
Yep.
and and once again, Cabot cheeses, or you get into some of the farmstead cheeses, all of this stuff, Jasper. They're all making
Jasper Hill's really good.
Jasper Hill's
world-class products. And so, yes, let's, and that's the type of business you want. You want people who are committed to doing something great. We've never been, you look back at the old Walmart struggles with us being, and the McDonald's, and just Vermont culture has always been like, we value quality and we care about those around us. So if you're coming to just make some sort of widget that's throwaway and potentially is going to be environmentally damaging or cheap and has no enduring value,
We don't want you.
we don't want it.
Right.
And we should be able to build on that.
Yeah.
So.
Totally.
Got me all psyched about Vermont.
But now that we've had our Vermont pep talk,
Exactly. Well,
Go out and do
but
wonderful
that's
things.
to be honest though, I feel like that's missing.
Yeah.
I remember growing up, we were I'll wax poetic, but Springfield, we were a D1 school, and we were always an underdog because we were smaller. We'd have to come up to the North Country, but we were always like, yeah, let's go, and I go in southern Vermont, and even though that's coming, I feel like you go into some of these towns, and it's like a vacuum.
Yeah.
Like you don't feel the energy that you used to.
A couple of years ago,
So-
Matt Dodds from Branthropology, I think I have his name correct.
Matt Dodds, yeah.
Matt Dodds, he got Heidi Sherman to sponsor a bill to do exactly what you're talking about for some minimal amount of money that he would market, or somebody would market Vermont. No, the legislature didn't see the
Yeah, I'm like,
the need for it. Maybe, listening to that presentation, maybe they would. Seriously,
Yeah.
we're sitting on a gold mine here.
The Vermont brand really can't be understated.
No.
It's
My
stronger.
husband stands in lines for some of the beers you mentioned. That's
Yeah.
just ridiculous.
yeah.
My own husband, what are you doing?
And you drive through Stowe, and
Yeah.
like this weekend, and there's like 300 cars backed up the street because everyone wants to be there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the place to be. So I just wanted to finish some of the things that you had on your website. You talked about small business development, which is something very passionate for me. We just leave those people in the dirt. We don't pay attention to our small businesses, and it's pretty sad.
Well, and I know, so getting out there and talking, once again, having traveled all over the state already, it's a consistent theme is access to capital, and access to
interesting.
capital under what I would call friendly terms. And that's where not only, because I would go bigger than even what I'm talking about with my innovation center idea, but I think that's something where to get people to invest or get them to do new things to expand, typically you need a 5 to 10 year capital plan. or access to capital at low rates that you know you can, to your point, predictability.
Right.
Give me
Right.
predictability. Give me some sort of fixed rate where I can go do something good. And these are people, small business owners, they watch every cent on their bottom line. If
And
they're
the
investing.
legislature has this thing that they've got some ridiculous return on investment, high percentage, and most of the small businesses are dealing with a very tiny return on investment, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like some ridiculous 3-4% return. It's like, how do they even survive? I don't know.
Yeah, well, but that is the fabric of lifestyle.
Yeah.
When it comes to small business is not something you get into to become a billionaire.
No, you don't.
In this day and age, you get into small business, unless it's tech and it blows up and it's simple, you can scale that way. But for most small businesses, it's, can I do something I'm passionate about every day, or at least something I'm proud of when I get up in the morning? Can I support myself, and can I take care of those around me? That's pretty awesome. That's what you want in your
Right.
community. So why wouldn't you do as much as possible
Right.
to support that? Especially, beyond the local level, the state, that should be a focus.
I know. I don't
So.
understand it. But
Who
that's the
knows?
way they are. Just, two more things, and
Yeah,
because I want to
yeah.
make sure we have time for other questions. But you talked about the environment,
Yes.
and what's that?
Well, I think I like people to know that, I don't know if I'd call myself a modernist in that way, but I've done a lot of things in the past with environmental groups. And I think that's still when you're talking about the Vermont brand, that's a
Right.
foundation of our brand, is a
Right.
clean environment. But, there's the but not to spite ourselves. Right now, we're spiting ourselves with regards to how we treat business.
Right.
And I think, once again, it's wealth begets wealth. And if you allow certain things to happen and you step back a little bit and say, let's be reasonable about things. There's an abandoned building. Yes, it probably needs some cleanup and needs this, but someone's willing to come in and start a business now. Okay, well, let's come up with a plan. And let's let them get that business started, because when you're starting or you're investing, you're worried about your capital flow. And to your point, it's unpredictable. I know friends who have opened up small businesses,
Right.
and Act 250 has hamstrung them. They're avid outdoors people who are environmentalists, and yet, so I think when I say the environment and a lot of the things, I like to think holistically in the platform is these are all
Find that
interconnected.
balance.
They're all
Right.
interconnected, but you have to find a reasonable balance where
Right.
the average citizen would look at it and say, does that sound reasonable?
Right. It's not an either or.
No.
No,
No.
exactly. And one more, just
Yeah.
because you mentioned
Yeah.
agriculture. Now, you fixing your farm up to be an active farm, or
Well,
just?
so we have this amazing barn, and I honestly cannot see myself rebirthing it as a
Oh.
dairy farm, because that part's not in my blood. I've done a little of that as a kid, and it's a lot of work. We want to fix up our barn to make it a community event space.
Oh, wonderful.
Because it's gorgeous.
That's great.
So we're working on that to fix it up. But in the meantime, we've been playing around with stuff. In fact, we just a couple days ago, because of frost warning, we had a field of hemp. So we're growing CBD hemp.
Huh.
And trying it out, because I actually happen to be on a board of an organization that helps cancer patients, usually stage 4. And
Wow.
just seeing the innovation going on in healthcare,
Yep.
and just the way I work, we have a bunch of land that wasn't being used except for hay, which is obviously a great use. But I was like, why don't we plant some hemp and just see how this goes?
And is hemp being used in cancer treatment?
Yeah, in fact, it's amazing what's going on at both the federal level and internationally right now. Is all
Right.
sorts of research coming out with regards to using hemp. So we're talking non-psychoactive. We're
Right.
not talking the party drug. Is being used to enhance chemotherapy delivery, that they're finding they
Really?
get better results that way. There's been some, I think, more nationally recognized stories with regards to epilepsy, which I have some personal
Okay.
stories there as well. But for the first time, and we'll call it cannabis-derived compounds are now getting approved through the FDA
Great.
for health use.
Good, I'd
And
sign up for that.
yeah,
I mean, if it's going to help, I mean, that's
Yeah.
just.
Yeah, I mean, and they haven't really studied it. CBD is one of those compounds that the research is just starting to come out on it because, because it's been, associated with THC and all that stuff. But if you can work with it on its own, there's a lot of potential health benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting space from looking at from both the public benefit as well as profitability.
Right.
How can you make money? And it's fascinating to see, especially right now. There's something happening that a lot of people might not be noticing, but maybe it's because I have my nose in the right articles or journals. But more research is coming out about alcohol, saying that we really can't say too many good things about alcohol, other than the fact that we all grew up with it as probably the social liquid of choice, and now the opposite's happening with with cannabis, where all of a sudden we're finding out, wow, wait a minute, hey, maybe it's not this big evil thing. And I'm not judging either way, because I'm a huge fan of craft beer, and frankly, I'd rather play that balanced equation once again of, I'm not overdoing it, so as long as I enjoy it and reason. It's fascinating to see, because I think there are not only markets there, but there's a social stigma that's rapidly eroding in a positive way, in my opinion.
I just don't see
So,
alcohol going anywhere.
No,
I mean, I
no.
fight this on, well, because it's in our food.
Yeah.
It's in recipes. It keeps,
Yeah.
every restaurant is dependent upon the bar. I mean, it's not going anywhere.
No,
It's
and
not.
I would, believe me, I would be the first one to say,
Yeah.
hey, it's a wonderful industry, and
Yeah.
it drives kind of this
sure.
cumulative effect
For
with all
sure.
these other industries. But at the same time, here's another one. Guess what?
Right. That's right.
We could do
Yeah.
good with that.
I had cancer
Sorry.
about 10 years ago, and we had somebody in the family just go through it again, and the difference between what I kept saying, well, ask this, ask that, and the doctor finally said, tell her to, it's all different.
Yeah.
It was just completely different. Everything's new and innovative, and
Yeah.
it's great. A lot of hope. Anyway, go ahead.
So when you're traveling around the state, what issues are your potential constituents really telling you they're most concerned about? Like, what are the things that you hear most often?
Well, obviously, we spent a lot of time on Act 46, but I think it comes down to taxes and budgets.
Yeah.
Everyone's the general consensus I'm hearing out there is, how do you expect us to pay more if you don't give us ways to earn more or to make more?
Right.
And it's logical for me, I guess. It's kind of funny how you look and sometimes you see the prevailing winds, and you're like, how is everyone not understand what is a simple equation of, if you empower people to do more, then naturally you're going to have more. So taxes are definitely one that people are concerned about, especially with the way we do it. And I know some other states do it this way, but the one investment an individual typically has that's their most valuable asset is their home. Mm-hmm. And we make homes very difficult to own
Yes,
here.
Yeah, we do.
And then getting into education once again, of people feeling a loss of control, as I'll tell you just my interpretation of Act 46 was that people were voting for something that they thought had an economic benefit to them. They thought, here's the panacea to lower our taxes. If we're willing to give this up, at least we're getting something in return. And now they're realizing, no, that's not the equation.
No.
That's not what's happening. So that's another big one. And then the final one, beyond what we talked about already with regards to marketing, is capital.
Yeah.
And people are saying, we would like to do good things, but we struggle with all these various, we do great things as a state. They're amazing programs once you start digging in, but you realize to find all these great things,
Right.
it's mission impossible. Either they're not socialized or marketed, or frankly, they should be consolidated. When I talk about consolidation, let's consolidate at the state level and bring some of these programs together in more streamlined funds, similar to my innovation fund, that you can distribute across needs, as opposed to saying, let's have different funds for every single different need and different applications and processes. No, people really need to know that they can have simpler access to ways to improve their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Act 46 one is interesting, for a number of reasons. I think you hit on something there when you're talking about people thought it was going to lower the cost of education. They're willing to give up maybe a little bit of local control in order to get there.
But you hear so many stories about merge with the one school district's got high. They've, like Berlin just approved a huge bond a couple of years ago. Well, that comes with the merger. So here you are with lower taxes, and then if you're going to merge with Berlin, you've got to share the.
And we just had this with down in our area. There's the Chester Andover Elementary School. Started out first day of school year, got flooded.
Oh.
Flood the whole school. They had to move the whole school
heard about that.
population
Oh, wow.
over to the Union High School. And from what I've heard, the project's going well, being very well managed, and insurance is going to cover it. But the realization hit our town that they were like, wait a minute, we're on the hook for this now.
Oh, right.
It's infrastructure we don't have any direct control over,
Right.
but we're responsible for paying for, which, okay, all well and good if everyone sees, to the point, sees that benefit, and you can attach a benefit. But right now, everyone's like, we're not seeing any benefits, and we're even more afraid of the future because of these things
Right.
that when you have local control, you have that knowledge. You're close to it.
And one of the things that we really haven't seen, at least to this point, the savings borne out in Act 46 yet. And there was a couple early ones that were, like the Essex-Westford merger, that were fairly significant savings from that one. That one was kind of a no-brainer. And that was going to happen before Act 46 anyway. But they're really, out of all the other mergers they're looking at 1, 2, maybe 3% savings overall over the next 5 years. And the reason for that is fairly basic, because they ignored what they'd already done. And the reality is they'd pushed all the services up to the supervisory union level anyway.
Right.
So when they consolidate these school districts, they're really not consolidating administrative functions, because all those administrative functions
And that was
are already
the focus,
at
was the administrative
the
function.
SU level.
Yeah.
And I would make that same argument of you start looking at those percentages, which aren't insignificant at scale. You know, percentage points mean something when you're talking millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. But turn around and assess local impact then and say, is this a return on investment with regards to, like I said, a town that I'm okay with if a town says we willfully want to give up our control, and not Act 46 model, but to your point, more collaborative of we have another district, we've come together and we've decided that we're going to merge or we're going to do something unique with our educational system that we think will benefit us. Great, that's part of my innovation, love it, but this forced impact, I don't think we're going to see the returns that everyone was promised.
So we only have 5 minutes left.
Yes.
The hour goes by fast.
Yeah.
I don't know, Ben, do you have a question that you would want to ask? And then I would like to wrap up with the stump speech question.
That's where I was going,
Okay.
but that's okay. But I guess, getting down to the point, we've talked a lot about a whole bunch of different issues, and fairly in a fair amount of depth. What would you tell our viewers, if you had, a minute to tell our viewers why they should vote for you over the two mainstream party candidates, and what you bring to the table that they don't, and why they should look to you as the option?
I think one strength that I bring to the table, even though I think both of them have wonderful track records in business, obviously they've been successful there, is a depth of experience in the innovation economy that they do not have. And when I talk about that, it's not only about technology and internet and those kind of things we classify as modern business development. I'm talking also just about the culture of creating a business-friendly environment for small businesses, for small innovation, and creating it and creating these ecosystems that build that scale and build that virtuous cycle. And I would wholeheartedly engage, and have already spoken with some of the people we've mentioned with regards to David Bradbury at VSET, and then Matt Dunn with what he's doing in southern Vermont, and some other places, amazing things happening in White River as well, and now Bennington redeveloping some blocks, like getting that collaborative effort together. Because I know one of the questions that's come up is, well, how would you manage this big beast
Right.
of state government that's complex? And it's called delegation. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's saying, let's identify our strengths and let's play to those strengths and let's enhance them. You know, whether it be the marketing, the branding, the productization, as well as what are the new industries that fit with our culture that we can promote that will bring the greatest benefit to our communities, with a focus on saying, let's help those that need it most. Chittenden County, I love you. You're doing great. Keep doing what you're doing.
Right.
Would like to take a lot of your success and leverage that as a blueprint, but let's allow these other localities and regions to figure out what their strength is or rediscover their strengths to rebuild their economies and solve their local problems.
That's great. I don't think we need the stump speech. That's it. One of the questions, and you brought it up, was that, you know, managing state government. It's huge.
Yeah.
Where I think we are now, sadly, the largest employer in Vermont, and used to be IBM, but that's changed dramatically. How do you make sure that you're delivering to the people the most effective, efficient service that you can? How are you thinking of doing that? And I think you just said about delegation, which got
Yeah.
my vote.
Yeah.
That's a lot of times it's too much control.
Yeah, and I think realistically, and I like to place myself in the position of being a realist, is that you're not going to change this overnight.
Right.
I know we've spoken a little bit about the fact that a governor has a 2-year term. To be effective at scale, 2 years is a drop in the bucket. So I think you have to be super focused on what you're going to do. And I think for the most part, my goal would be to see the ways we can free up capital that's now being controlled at the state and push it back to the localities in ways that's a benefit to all, where it's accountable, it's trackable, and and I think that would be the big.
That's great. They really are looking at performance-based management now,
Yes.
which sadly they don't have it staffed adequately. They've just got one person doing it. It's my sister. But anyway, I mean, they're on the right. They're sort of on that performance-based track, which is good, and getting money out to the people that need it is perfect. So anyway, I really thank you for being on the show.
Thank you,
It's been a
Pat. I
pleasure
appreciate
meeting
it.
you, Ben. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for
Ben,
tuning
thank
in,
you.
you all, and we'll see you next week. And in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.